well so everybody can let me know. So, hi everybody, thanks for joining us. My name is Karolina Powell. I'm a prospect manager with Dudley Land Company, landman certification with the AAPL. Nice to see some friendly faces. Glad everybody's doing well and staying healthy. For us that are joining for the first time, welcome. Hopefully you join us for some future lunch and learns. As I mentioned, I am doing this from home, so don't be surprised if you hear a dog barking or a toddler crying or any noises. If you have things like Johnny mentioned, go ahead and put them in the chat window and we'll get to them at the end. And if for any reason you can't see me or anything, please unmute and let me know because I cannot see the chat function while I have my screen shared. Okay, so we're going to discuss the very, very exciting topic of real property legal descriptions. I know this is a topic near and dear to a lot of people's hearts, especially if you're an attorney or a title agent. But this is just going to be a big overview on the topic. So a very beginner's course as to why property legal descriptions are important and kind of a quick rundown of the types of property legal descriptions and how to read them. So it's not the course or you're running into, this is going to be, like I said, a very big overview. So for those unfamiliar with Dudley Land Company, we're going to provide project planning and project upstream and midstream segments. We provide mineral and surface acquisition services. We handle title, abstracting, curative, GIS, and due diligence work. Our subsidiary National Field Services also provides right-of-way planning and routing. They do permitting and regulatory compliance and environmental services, cycle and delineation. On the left there, you'll see my contact info. If you want to check anything relating to this or otherwise, that's my cell phone, that's my email. It'll also be stated at the end of the presentation. All right, so let's get. Okay, legal descriptions, what and why. So a lot of people, if they have to pull a deed from the courthouse, they are usually looking at like the grantee to know to acquire rights from, or they're looking at the reservation language if you're looking at like mineral reservations. Most of the time we're skipping over this long paragraph in the middle, which is your description. However, legal descriptions are actually the one of the leading causes of title failure if they're defective. A legal description must describe the so that it be identified and located on the ground. For example, if this legal description deed said something like a certain tract of land, Liberty District, Marshall County, West Virginia, being 50 acres owned by Mr. That's not, therefore causes possible title failure for that conveyance. So usually this or like planning stage because you know you're going to get to it in your title stage of a project, right? However, this where you can save yourself a lot of time down the line by just being familiar and glancing through this and making sure there's nothing off about it. So the purpose of these presentations is to just give you basically another tool. So if you saw Adam Gailey's January presentation, he showed you how to identify some environmental problems before you file. So we can do the same thing before you start, doing your title work on a project. Okay, so types of descriptions. There's multiple types of descriptions you might run into. I'm going to focus on the two different types that you see in Appalachia. So the original 13 colonies use a meets and bounds system. So that will include Pennsylvania and West Virginia since it was part of Virginia at the time. Once you hit Ohio, they start using the Public Land Survey System, PLSS it's called. Eastern Ohio still kind of has a combination of the two. As you go further west, you'll find that meets and bounds is used less often, although there are pockets of the country where that's not. PLSS, because I believe in my mind at least it's the easier of the two. So PLSS, like it sounds, the government went ahead and surveyed land donated to landowners. So everything is broken down into these square townships, then further broken down into sections and then parts of sections. So nice squares. Obviously, putting squares on a round, on a globe doesn't work quite well. So you do have things like corrective sections to make it work. But for the purposes of this presentation, just everything it's relatively well laid out and easily identifiable. So in this first example here, this is Township 2S R3W. So it's 2 south from the baseline and 3 west of the principal median. And let's say we're talking about section 4. That's your section 14 highlighted there. You'll notice a township has 36 sections. And let's say we're talking about the west half of the southeast quarter. So I'm hoping everybody can see my arrow. If you can't, let me know. It's this half of the southeast quarter of section 14 of township T2S R3W. Very easily to identify. Another example here is something you'll see on a deed. Situated in Salem Township, County of Jefferson, the state of Ohio, being part of the southeast quarter of section 29, Township 10, Range 3. So looking up the south, section 29, which would be like somewhere in Township 10, Range 3. As you notice, this is the township and range here is missing the directional calls, but the township is identified. So very easy to figure out what land you are talking about. In Pennsylvania and West Virginia, though, we do not use the PLSS system. They utilize bound system. We start at a landmark. Usually it's a natural landmark such as a tree or a river, or sometimes a neighbor's boundary. We calls and measurements and end up back at the beginning most times, and that's how you identify your piece of property. So in this deed, we're looking at a certain tract or parcel of land in Buffalo District, Burke County, West Virginia. West Virginia has districts instead of townships, and this piece of property is the line of other lands of Mrs. S. and G. Weigman and at a corner of William H. Stewart's portion. So this starts at a neighbor's boundary, then we follow the calls and the directions and the measurements and end up with something like this, and it's about 50 less. Obviously, you run into a lot of problems with meets in the bounds description. Those chestnut trees, be a boundary and everything, are very popular in Pennsylvania, for example. So you do want to look at your legal descriptions deed by deed to have the right property that you're looking for. And we'll just kind of discuss how we go about reading those. All right. So what about tax maps? Unless you're a title agent, right? The first thing you do, you go pull a county tax map, or if you're in Google Earth, you pull a KMZ layer from the county, and that's how you put together a line list. Obviously, we factor in like topography, environmental concerns, ownership, permittability, when you're putting together possible routes, but you should look at your legal description in this step. So funny story, I live in Pennsylvania, and about 2 years ago, I drive up my driveway and noticed a giant stake with a big pink neon board stapled to it. Get out of my car, look at what's written on the neon board, and it says that my land is going to be sold in a tax sale for the taxes steps. Super embarrassed, pull the stake out as quickly as I can, try to shove it in the back of my Civic, run into the house, look through, my records to make sure my property taxes are paid. Looks like they are, so I call up the assessment office and say, hey, there's this giant notice in my yard. What is going on? And they say, oh, yeah, okay, your property's okay, but there's a property somewhere around there that somebody hasn't paid their taxes on, and we don't know where it is. So they must have put the stake, the notice in your yard. So as a landowner, obviously how does the county not know where pieces of property are? But as a project manager, that's like a very scary thought. In my case, actually, Range Resources was running a water line right on the boundary. And can you imagine being that project manager and suddenly realizing there's a piece of property you don't know where it is that you might not have gotten an agreement signed for? So your county maps are not, or just can't be relied upon as surveys. You still have to look at your legal description. This is why if you log into any of your county GIS or website, you see something like this that says the county makes no warranties or representations as to the accuracy of information on this website, nor do they assume any liability or responsibility. So the county does its best to make sure its tax or its maps are well represented, but you still have to look at the legal description. You cannot only rely on a map or the KMZ layer to put together your routes. Okay, so here's another example. The black is outlines from a county parcel map, and these were actually what it looks like. And assume the blue is a planned temporary water line. Okay, so this is obviously a temporary line. You're not going to go ahead and get a survey done. So how do you go about ensuring that you have all the correct owners signed? You want to look at those deeds and look at those legal descriptions to ensure that they match your map. So in this case, our subject property that we found something wrong with was this piece that is darker than the rest here. Taking a quick look at it, on the county, you can easily measure this, and it's about 500 feet in width. Compare it to the deed. And if you'll notice, the deed is actually about 290 feet in width. So obviously there is a problem because there is a large discrepancy between 290 feet and 500. Plotting the rest of this legal description gives you a shape like this. That is very different than what the county's showing it as, which is this. So we obviously have a problem. We go ahead and pull the deeds to the neighbors, and finally fix the map. We end up having something that looks like this. Now you can see that this parcel looks much more like that deed plot that we had drawn earlier. Oh, great, we fixed this map. Unfortunately, that led to one more landowner that needs signed here. If you noticed what our route looked like originally, that landowner did not need signed. So we were able to catch it in time. And unfortunately, this landowner, let's just say he was expecting more than we were willing to pay. So this made this route possibly unfeasible. So that's the sort of things that you can easily catch early before you spend manpower talking to landowners or doing anything like that. You can easily catch the fact that you need to go with a possibly different route. Okay, so how do you read this? So these are not to scale, but they'll kind of give you an idea. So every single legal description that you see, you got to take it basically sentence by sentence. So if a deed says north 50 degrees east 500 feet, you are going to draw out your cardinal directions. So assume this line is north, this line is south, this line is west, this line is east. You're going to start at your northern line. You're going to go 50 degrees east towards your eastern line, because that's where it says east. And you're going to draw a line that's 500 feet in length. Does that make sense? You start going north here, you draw towards your east line, and this is your length. So let's do another one. South 10 degrees west 100 feet. So we start at, where's my mouse? There it is. We start at your southern line. Okay. You go west 10 degrees, so you're going towards your western line, and then your line then is 100 feet. Another example that's not drawn on here, let's just say it says north 300 feet. Well, so you start at your northern line, and there's no directional call going either way, so you would just go due north 300 feet. Hopefully that makes sense. Obviously, doing these by hand is cumbersome and not very efficient if you had to draw every single call on a deed. So there are programs and apps that can be helpful. Some of these programs are Net Deed Plotter and Meets and Bounds. However, it's very important to know what you're reading. because it's very easy. Most of these programs, you still have to type in what the deed says. So if you accidentally make a typo or you misread that cursive and it's supposed to say east instead of west, you want to have an idea of what you're supposed to be looking at. So it's important to understand how these calls work and not just take the program at its word. Some of these programs you can import the deed in, but it only works for very recent type deeds. So most of the time you're still reading that legal description. You kind of have an idea of what the shape's supposed to look like in your head, and then you end up doing it that way. That's usually the most efficient way to do it. Okay, so is it really that simple? So this is a beginner's course, so I will say no, it's not that simple. There are numerous other complexities with legal descriptions. For example, even though a legal description may say it goes to the edge of a river, in most cases the landowner actually owns to the center of the river unless it's navigable. And then you get into the discussion of how do you know if it's navigable, and that'll vary. Then state rules and regulations can impact ownership. So despite what a legal description might claim, laws such as the ones regarding adverse possession can dictate ownership. For example, currently working with a deed where the grantors gave land to a church and said once this stops being used for church purposes, the land is supposed to revert back to the landowner. Well, the church closed down in 2004, and so you would think, okay, so I need to go get an agreement signed by the original landowner. Well, the state we're working in, there's a law that says if the area is still being used as a graveyard and there are actually tombstones still there from when it was a church, that it still remains a church. So now we have to hunt down descendants of the people buried there and get them to agree to be appointed trustees and sign those. So these are just some of the complexities you get in title. So that's why it's important to utilize locally experienced agents and attorneys that know the rules and the laws of that particular area that you're working in. However, this is a good overview so that you can identify problems early on. Okay, so what about legal descriptions on agreements? When you put together a right-of-way agreement, you're not going to go, survey the land. So you don't get this giant description with calls and distances, and it doesn't look as complicated as it does on a deed. However, the same thing applies. It must describe the parcel of land so that it can be identified and located on the ground. A bad legal description can absolutely void a lease or right-of-way agreement. So as a best practice, I'm sure if you've seen agreements, you'll notice that they use multiple identifiers. Usually, in most cases, you'll have a parcel number identified on the agreement or lease. You'll also then have a bounded by description, and that'll give you the neighbors. It'll either use the names of the neighbors or parcel numbers. So for example, on the north by Grant Stetz, on the south by Travis Powell, or bounded on the north by 06-00.00072, and the east by 00073. Either one's fine. Then you'll usually have a reference description, being the same land sold to the grantor in deed book so-and-so and so-and-so. And if you still have a complex piece of property that might, have an irregular shape, so bounded by description makes it a little difficult, or it doesn't have a parcel number in the case where, I was describing earlier where the county had no idea where this piece was. You can also include an exhibit and a map. So nothing wrong to say if you want to be super clear, this agreement covers the piece of property in Exhibit A, attach a plat to the agreement. Now you have to make sure your plat is correct in that case because it's hard to argue that you meant something different if you attach a map. And then in most cases, you also want to include a Mother Hubbard clause. This will cover small discrepancies. Let's say your reference description goes to the edge of a road, whereas they actually own to the center of the road. So Mother Hubbard clause would go ahead and cover that discrepancies. Now, there has been numerous court cases on this. It will not cover large adjacent tracts. So if you meant to sign Johnny for tracts A and B, and both are 100 acres, and you only put A on there, but you had a Mother Hubbard clause that would not cover Tract B. So you do have to be very careful in writing your agreements and making sure they actually cover what you want them to cover. So that is the end of this presentation. Does anybody have any questions? I will be perfectly honest, I am not an attorney. So if you have specific questions, such as who actually owns what in this case, maybe we can get some of our attorney friends to chime in. But any broad overviews, throw them at me and I'll do my best to answer. Johnny, do we have anything in the chat window? Okay.
We do not have anything in the chat.
I have a comment. Can you all hear me?
Yeah.
Just that in my experience, we always used to have people actually sign the exhibit so that they have a general idea or understanding of where these GPS maps that we have. Sometimes, in my experience, they've been 300 feet off of the original line that is described or depicted on an exhibit that we print out and present. And so we have them sign those exhibits so that they know are in agreement with a general knowledge of where the pipeline is going, where we see the description of the property lines to be, and that they understand that.
Yep. A lot of projects definitely do that.
Caroline, we do have a question in the chat. It said, please explain the Mother Hubbard clause a little bit better. They're not familiar with it.
So in most cases, it just says something like this agreement also covers and includes any and all lands owned by the landowner in this district / township. It's really meant to just account for those little small discrepancies in your legal description. So for example, let's say you have not a square, but you have a rectangular shaped piece of, or let's say you have an L-shaped piece of property and you've got two sets of neighbors, but you only list one set of neighbors, the most northern set of neighbor. And so to make it clear that you are covering all the lands owned by this landowner, you basically, that's the clause you put in. I actually have the exact language here. So for an example, this agreement also covers and includes any and all lands owned or claimed by the lessor adjacent or contiguous to the land described here and above, whether the same be in said survey or surveys or in adjacent surveys. So that's an example. Oftentimes in these meets and bounds description, you'll have a description. So 1950, there's a pipeline agreement, and at that point the property was 160 acres. Suddenly in 2014, you get a brand new survey done, and it actually tells you, oh, it's 172 acres. That is not uncommon in the meets and bounds world because the descriptions rely on, natural landmarks often. Because there's a Mother Hubbard clause in that original agreement that will cover that brand new survey. Any other questions, comments, weird descriptions people have seen?
I had a situation. I was doing a seismic project in West Virginia, and it was in two different county lines. Yes. So in Mon County, it said that the landowner owned like 300 acres, but in Marion County, it was like 600 acres. Well, it turned out what Marion was tracking was the mineral ownership, and the other county was just doing the surface. Especially when you get on, those county lines, you're going to get a little bit maybe different data.
Yes, definitely. And you'll find tax maps right around county lines are very, very different. So if you're ever working right around a border, you definitely do want to pull deeds and assessments and tax maps for that parcel and the neighboring parcels in both counties to make sure you've got an accurate representation. That
And
is just,
in addition to that, welcome to West Virginia.
yes. Yes. Leaps and bounds. All right. Johnny, do you have, obviously, here's my contact information. If anybody wants to ask a question and shoot me an email, text, or call, that's my cell phone. Always available. I really do enjoy legal description puzzles. So if anybody has an interesting one at any point they want to discuss, feel free to reach out. Johnny, otherwise, do we have any other housekeeping items that we have to go over?
No, just once again, I'd like to ask everybody. I think I've captured almost everybody. We've got a couple people as guests and a couple people logged in as under a phone number that I'm not familiar with. So once again, if everybody could drop me an email, let me know. I'll send out the accreditations for those who want their AAPL credit, continuing ed credit, and then we have a couple of SRWAs that would get credits as well. And then, we're looking forward to next month as well. We're not sure if we're going to be in a virtual event in June or not. It depends on Pennsylvania. Also, West Virginia, as our speaker works for the state of West Virginia, and they may not be allowed to travel yet. But we'll keep everybody in the breast of what's going on. And it was great that we had a lot of, we had like 15 new people signed up for today. So that I don't know if everybody got on, but it's good to see that we have more and more people. And then also we have a board meeting coming up next Tuesday. If you would like to be part of that, we're going to be doing it virtually. So let us know. And we're going to start planning next year's speakers and topics. So any suggestions or volunteers for that, and the same, please let us know so we can start working those different angles.
Great.
So just like to thank everybody for joining us today. I don't know if anybody else on the board has anything else to comment or say.
Hey, Johnny. Oh, Johnny, can you hear me?
Yes, go ahead.
Yeah, hi, this is Joe Curry. I'm out here in San Diego. I was curious. This is a great opportunity for people to, stay in touch, with everything that's going on. But I was curious, is there a limit? I mean, is there an upper limit to the number of folks that Blue Jeans can handle?
It's like Zoom. There's 100 people.
Okay, so you could potentially max out, I suppose. But I was just wondering. I mean, I let some folks know over here that I was doing this, and I actually had a lot of interest. And I didn't want to just, forward invites and things because I think you guys probably need to have your own folks over, regionally be able to take advantage of this more so. But I wanted to throw that out to let you know that there is interest, just in other areas. And it might be something to discuss to see if, we could open it up to other regions.
If anybody ever wants to be added to the mailing list, please send over their information. Or if you're going to forward it to somebody, just copy me on it. We're just trying to track who we've got coming in, just so we know who we're talking to. Also, the other thing I wanted to bring up was that if you go out to the calendar events link that we maintain, and it covers the country as we see stuff that we think people in our industries would be interested in viewing. I constantly am updating that, especially now with a lot of webinars. So, I try to capture as much stuff on LinkedIn and throw it on that calendar. It tells what day it is, the link to register, a little bit of detail. I sign up for more webinars than I can actually attend, but you never know what your schedule is going to be. So it's a great resource. And if there's other events that we're missing, please let us know. As things are changing because now things are opening back up. Some events that were canceled or postponed are now being added, and it's kind of hard to keep track of all that as everything's is moving one way or the other right now. And thanks, Joe. We appreciate the input because it is a community, and you never know where you're going to be working next.
Yeah.
Or if you're on a project that you're not familiar with and you have a contact from somewhere else across the country, that would be, a resource. You never know who knows what you need to know.
And
Yeah,
Joe,
absolutely.
this is Ryan. One of the things that's really important is when Johnny sends out the will you be attending, yes, no, or maybe, is to respond to that. So if we only have 40 people say yes, then we really push it on LinkedIn and push it nationally. So if we don't get those responses, it's very hard to know how many people are signed up.
And if you let me know you're not coming, I'll stop emailing you for that month. So,
Hey, I say, I say the more the merrier, right? If we have people in California, great. Wherever.
Yeah, we're people too, right?
No.
Bring some of that nice weather. That's what we need.
Yeah. Yeah, we'll do. Well, I always offer to have like team meetings out here whenever I can, but apparently we can't do that now. So it's really good to really, find other, points of view on a lot of the technical issues across the country. I really enjoy, I've been involved in IRWA government a little bit, over the past. And so I've been exposed to other, region offerings, and I found it really interesting to be able to find out what other people in other parts of the country are coming up against, and especially like even with legal descriptions as an example, there's differences that a lot of people aren't even aware of. Out in California we have all the ranchos from back when this was Mexico, and so there's differences there. It's really interesting to be able to keep up with. And I think even like you said, Johnny, when you really don't know where you're going to be working next sometimes, and so it's really good to be able to have that more broad viewpoint of how things may be coming across to the rest of the country.
Yeah, and on
Excellent
that note
point.
also, we do send out everybody who is on this call, we send out their contact information to the whole group. So you can add to, people on LinkedIn. It's kind of nice because you can't see everybody that's in attendance today. But I encourage everybody, and if you're a first timer and you don't want me to share your phone number or you just want your email shared, please let me know when you follow up with an email on it. But we just do that so we can, hopefully expand everybody's network. And, we've got some people from Parkersburg on here today, and I think Missouri and California. So, we've got, a nice, collective of people, and our industries overlap. So, it's just good to be able to expand that address book and those contacts on LinkedIn, and be able to get to know people that you may have not had a chance to know.
Yeah, agreed. Thank you for doing this and open it up. I guess I should thank Ryan. He's the one who invited me. So
Thanks, Ryan.
It's
He's the one
amazing
that
how
started
many.
it all.
Well, it's amazing how many people you meet when you start traveling to different IRWA forums and classes around the country, which I encourage because of your networking group. But they do have phenomenal online classes. But that's how I ended up meeting Joe. Was Salt Lake City? Is that right?
yeah, Park City.
Park City. And that's where I met Daniel Stucco as well.
Yeah, there you go.
All right. Well, I appreciate you all having me. Like I said, my email and phone number is there in case I could ever help with anything. And I think we had a great meeting. Thanks for joining. For everybody that's new, hopefully you join us for the next few we have.
Thank you,
you.
Carolina.
Thank you, Carolina.
Thank you, Carolina.
Everybody for joining, and we'll be in touch for next month. Thank you very much.
Yeah, thank you.